The Lessons from Rich Dad and Poor Dad. Introduction to Rich Dad, Poor Dad, a financial classic. It began one sunny afternoon when I stumbled upon a worn-out book on my friend's shelf, titled Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Intrigued by the title, I borrowed it and soon after found myself completely engrossed. The book, written by Robert Kiyosaki, seamlessly wove together lessons from two paternal influences in his life. These arena taihi, just any lessons but the kind that change everything you thought you knew about money, work, and the path to financial independence. Rich Dad. Not related by blood, he was the father of Kiyosaki, TM's best friend, and a shrewd, self-made entrepreneur. He believed in building assets and understanding how money works. Poor Dad. Kiyosaki, Mem's biological father, a highly educated man, clung to traditional beliefs about financial security, emphasizing job stability and the virtues of a strong educational background. Through these two contrasting figures, Kiyosaki introduced concepts that truly expanded my horizons. The rat race. Through the lens of his poor dad, Kiyosaki depicted the endless cycle of working for wages, paying bills, and living paycheck to paycheck. Assets versus liabilities. My perception shifted dramatically when I learned what truly constitutes an asset. Spoiler, your car and house might not be one. The importance of financial education. TM's not just about making money. TM's about knowing how to manage it, grow it, and safeguard it through investments and keen financial strategies. I also learned about embracing risk. Rich Dada TM's approach urged me to look beyond the fear of the unknown and consider how calculated risks could lead to substantial rewards. Mindset shift, changing my perspective from I cannot afford this to how can I afford this, unlocked a potential within me that I hadn't tapped into before. In essence, Rich Dad, Poor Dad isn't merely a book. It seems a wake-up call wrapped in compelling anecdotes and practical advice. By the time I flipped the last page, I had a completely new outlook on financial freedom and the knowledge to take concrete steps towards achieving it. Understanding the messages of Rich Dad and Poor Dad. I remember the exact moment I stumbled upon Rich Dad, Poor Dad, clutching the book tightly as if it held the secrets of the universe. The story follows Robert Kiyosaki as he contrasts the financial philosophies of his rich dad and poor dad. On one side, his biological father, the poor dad, is a well-educated man who believes in the traditional path of education and employment. On the other side, the rich dad, his friend Wadham's father, champions financial independence through investment and entrepreneurial endeavors. My eyes were opened when I read the vivid stories of both fathers. Poor Dad emphasized the importance of good grades, securing a stable job, and saving money cautiously. His lessons were: get a good education, find a secure job, save money, and invest in a safe portfolio. Conversely, Rich Dad had a starkly different approach to money and education. He believed in financial literacy as the cornerstone of financial success and lessons that included understand the difference between assets and liabilities, focus on acquiring income-generating assets, mind your own business, work towards your own ventures. At one point, I found myself grappling with the conflicting messages. On one hand, the security of Poor Dad TM's advice was comforting, a known path well trodden. On the other hand, Rich Dad's advice promised financial freedom but also evoked a sense of uncertainty and risk. What fascinated me was how Robert's Rich Dad reframed money as a tool that should work for you instead of the other way around. He drove home the lesson that real wealth comes from smart investments and understanding market opportunities. When Rich Dad spoke about making money work for you, it felt like unlocking a new level in a game. Suddenly, the rules had changed. These teachings didn't only contest traditional notions of work and savings, but also encouraged a proactive, versatile mindset. The realization that wealth could be built through intelligent financial decisions was a revelation. It made me question, why? Am I living by poor dad's cautious creed, or am I ready to embrace the adventurous spirit of rich dad? So started my journey of delving deeper into financial education, inspired to chart my own path to financial independence. Contrasting perspectives: rich dad versus poor dad. I remember my first encounter with the opposing philosophies. My poor dad, a man of conventional wisdom, believed in the security of a stable job. He preached the value of education, encouraging me to get good grades, go to college, and secure a well-paying job. His perspective was rooted in the traditional belief that working hard would eventually lead to a secure and comfortable life. On the other hand, my rich dad, an entrepreneurial visionary, saw the world differently. His mantra revolved around making money work for you rather than working for money. He often said, "The faster your money earns money, the faster you are by you will become wealthy." This notion puzzled me initially. Rich Dad's view on education was nuamtuti, about acing exams, but understanding the principles of investing, real estate, and growing businesses. He was convinced that financial literacy was the key to freedom and independence, a stark contrast to poor dad's emphasis on academic excellence. Their views diverged in specific areas. Conclusion: implementing the lessons in your life. I remember the first time I held that book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, in my hands. It felt like a map, leading me to a treasure trove of wisdom. As I dove into its pages, I saw the contrast between the teachings of the rich dad and the poor dad. Each chapter was like a conversation with two mentors, each whispering different strategies and mindsets into my ear. I started by re-evaluating my financial education. My poor dad believed in the traditional route of getting good grades, landing a secure job, and sticking to it. But the rich dad's voice echoed louder. Invest in your education beyond the classroom. I began seeking knowledge in financial literacy, reading books, attending workshops, and immersing myself in understanding how money works. To make these lessons tangible, I set specific goals. I created a budget, something my poor dad did no TMT focus on. Visualizing my spending habits was eye-opening. Each dollar now had a purpose, aligned with growing my assets rather than just managing expenses. Listing out my financial goals kept me on track and motivated. Networking was another area where the rich dad's advice truly resonated. Unlike my poor dada TM's conventional approach, I began to connect with like-minded individuals, attending networking events and forums. These new connections provided not only knowledge, but opportunities. They challenged and inspired me, much more than a solitary journey ever could. I began prioritizing investing early, channeling savings into assets rather than liabilities. Real estate piqued my interest. I researched, talked to experts, and finally took the plunge with my first property. That moment was both terrifying and exhilarating. A leap of faith, guided by the teachings of the rich dad. Implementing these lessons was always smooth sailing. There were setbacks and moments of doubt, yet every stumble was a learning moment in itself, reinforcing the principles I had picked up. Slowly but surely, each lesson from the contrasting fathers sculpted my path